grateful to have you with us, Retha. Thank you so much for your time, for your love for people, and just for the years and years of application in your field of expertise. The way that you've devoted yourself to helping people, and particularly people in relationships, to find a great way forward. So we're so excited to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. And just thank you for inviting me to be able to speak with you guys and just describe and then discuss some of the ideas and the thoughts that I've had. So let's say a place to start. I'm a counseling psychologist, and this next year will be my full 10th year of post-qualification work. And so much of that work has been had with the younger people in a higher education university context. And I have a private practice where I work with diverse kinds of people with many diverse kinds of challenges. Now, with people, among the biggest areas of challenges that people have in their lives has to do with partner relationships, has to do with the relationships that they have with their partners, whether they're still dating or they're married or they're engaged. And this serves as a huge amount or a huge proportion of the work that I've been doing with people. Now, I've seen people as couples, of course, when they've come together seeking help or guidance about a particular kind of challenge that they've been having. But I've also seen multitudes of people who come as singles or come to therapy by themselves, speaking about the challenges that they have in relationships. And over the years, like I was saying before in our commentary with Basil, is a question of, I've had so many conversations with so many people regarding so many of the different kinds of challenges that they experience in their romantic relationships. And all of those things need to be addressed in many different kinds of ways, whether we're speaking about communication challenges, whether we're speaking about how to be able to resolve conflicts, all kinds of things. But the thing that I kept coming back to is a question of, but what's going on here? What are the deep similarities regarding the kinds of problems that people are having? Where is this coming from? And I've had a lot of time to think about it. What it is that I'll be describing is my understanding of what I think can be condensed as being a part of the core of the challenge that people are facing nowadays in the dating and marketplace and in marriage. So a place to start, I feel, is a place which deals with, from my chair as a mental health care practitioner, regardless of who I'm seeing, regardless of the presenting problem, what it is that I like to give clients as a way of thinking of what a better outcome will look like. So, you may want a particular romantic relationship outcome. You might want this to change, them to change, yourself to change. You can get to that. But in terms of defining what success is in the broadest possible terms, the ways that I like to have people thinking about it is from a place of understanding the difference between what is actually healthy in a person's life as compared to what it is unhealthy. With the idea of want people to have healthy things in their lives, which is not a controversial idea. I think people can agree with that. And we can have an understanding of what that looks like in the body. But what it is that I also like to explore with people is what that looks like on the inside of themselves, in terms of how they think, in terms of the patterns of how they feel, how they see themselves, what they believe about the world, and so on. So that's what I always like to say. Being healthy is the overall objective. Now, as a psychologist, the way that I like to think about what being healthy is of course not just about what's happening with the person's body. But let's start there. How would I define what being healthy is in a person's life? I think the first thing to get out the way is that no one is ever perfectly healthy. It doesn't matter how fit you are physically. It doesn't matter how well you eat, how much you exercise. We all have to deal with some level of not being healthy, even if we are fit, and our health wavers from time to time. So I always like to say perfection is off the table. But when you're dealing with a person, let's use the example of the body. When a person's body is unhealthy, there's all different kinds of ways of being unhealthy. But one of the things that you'll notice, regardless of what illness you might have or an injury you might have, is that your ability to have your body function in the way that you want it to function is diminished. So it could be anything like what's happening with me right now. I have a bit of a something happening at the back of my throat and my voice sounds different. I would like it to sound better than this. And so there's a level of diminished function. But of course, it gets worse than that. People find themselves having a flu, you have a fever, you can't smell very well, you might be sneezing, shakes, all the way down to very, very serious and life-threatening illnesses that people can have, where their body is just, it's falling apart, they're very particularly sick, and their lives might be at risk. But the basic idea is that when a person is experiencing experiencing themselves as being unhealthy, their body is not functioning in the way that they would prefer it to. Most people would prefer for their bodies to be able to behave the way that they want it to behave. So that if I want to go for a walk, I can go for a walk. If I want to go for a run, I can go for a run. If I want to eat, I can smell my food and it tastes great. Whatever it is, that to be healthy isn't just about things not going wrong. So when a person is healthy, it isn't just that they're not sick. Being healthy is definitely part of it, has to do with not being sick, but it's about more than that. It's about having something. And the way that I like to describe what that looks like is that you have health, you have thriving, you have vitality. Like I said, you're able to go outside and enjoy the sun. You're able to walk when you want to, run when you want to. You're able to enjoy the food that you want to. You have strength, you have energy, you have vitality. So being healthy is about having something. So that's part of how I like to describe what being healthy is. In those terms, a person who is healthy would describe themselves as having freedom. I have the freedom to have my body function like this. I have the freedom to have the energy. I have the freedom to have strength. And so I like to describe to people that having health or being healthy is really about having freedom. But the idea being, therefore, that what helping you looks like is that you have more freedom and not less. So there's freedom increasing and then bondage restricting you in. That would be in the case of the body. But the same thing applies to everything else that is you as a person. That's not just physical, because of course you have things about you that people can't see, that people can't hear, that people can't touch, that they're a part of you. And that has to do with the way that you feel, or the patterns of how you think, or the patterns of the things that you believe about yourself, about the world. As a psychologist, we're talking about mental health. But I like to describe it simply by saying the inside of you. Okay, that too has the ability to not be healthy. And when it's not healthy, I think generally people are able to understand what that looks like and what that feels like, right? A person who's experiencing themselves as being unhealthy on the inside would say that they weren't just sad, they were experiencing something deeper than that, something more crushing, something that lasts over a long period of time. When a person might be experiencing anxiety that doesn't go away and it stays. When a person might be experiencing very unhealthy patterns of thinking about themselves, about the world, they might be struggling with connecting with people emotionally. Any number of the ways that the inside of you can be unhealthy. That's kind of what it is that it would look like. The opposite of that, when a person is healthy on the inside, it would be feeling positive, being able to connect with people, having healthy ways of thinking and feeling about yourself, about the world, having hope, having a sense of purpose, feeling connected. Those are the kinds of things that are associated with what being healthy on the inside for a person. Again, Perfection is off the table. Sometimes you have bad days. Sometimes you have good days. Most of the time, you're somewhere in between. You know, I like to say, in my line of work, no news is good news. You know, so that when things are just normal, I'm happy, right? So again, being healthy is about having the freedom to experience myself on the inside in that sort of way. I'm thriving, I'm improving, I'm growing, I am expanding. So that being unhealthy is about being in bondage, being restricted in those kinds of ways that I showed as examples. Okay, so um, when it comes to how it is that I like to approach any given challenge that people have, those are the broad parameters. Those are the goalposts that I like to have. Wherever this conversation to you and I, my client, is going to go, based on what it is that you say you needed help with when you came here. Overall, I think what success would look like is when you have more health and therefore more freedom for you to live your life the way that you want to and to experience it that way, as compared to what the opposite is like, where you have less freedom and you are feeling restricted, you're feeling in bondage, and so on, right? So that's the first point that I like to make. And so this is relevant regarding these parameters as to what we want, what a person should be looking for. I believe in their life is relevant for all kinds of presenting problems, all kinds of reasons why people might come for therapy. But in this context, we're talking about the implications that it has for romantic relationships, right? Because when a person is considering the idea of being with a person, the thinking about what's going to be healthy for me is very, very important. However, the point that I'm going to drive at as being what I believe a lot of what lies at the roots of the challenges that people experience in romantic relationships is that this need, this critical foundational need for health is not considered as much as people think it is. And in fact, there are other considerations that people are making going in. A lot of them that they don't see that are actually muddying the waters. Things that are valid, things that they want, things that they feel. And these things are important in a relationship. But without actually considering to yourself, before you choose a partner, is this person going to be healthy for you? It makes it much easier, unfortunately, to find yourself falling or into the pitfalls of all the different kinds of ways that relationships can become unhealthy. And that's because of it's a simple idea, but I think it's a very important one. And it's one that people kind of will understand, that sometimes what you want and what you feel like is not necessarily going to be what's healthy for you. And so it's important to not just be making decisions on the basis of what you want when you're thinking about a potential partner, or what you feel like when making a decision during a relationship, but it has to do with, is this healthy for me? Is this person actually healthy for me? And am I healthy for them? Right? So the idea of chasing health as the basis of a relationship is what it is that I'm going to be able to explain. Doing so gives you many benefits, right? The first thing is, when a person has health, they have freedom, like I said, and the freedom to live your life the way that you would want to. Being free is about having peace in your heart, that certain things might be going wrong, but there's a sense of stability in my life about what's happening, and to have joy. And the idea is, when people chase health in a romantic relationship, what it is that they are chasing is something much more reliable than what it is that they may want sometimes, and what it is that they may feel like sometimes, right? So overall, as you're thinking about choosing a partner, before we talk about the list, because people usually have a list, the person must look like this, they must talk like that. Maybe they might come from this sort of background, make this amount of money, all of this kind of stuff. All of those things are important. I am validating it. I'm not saying they don't matter. But before we start talking about the list and what kind of partner you want, the first question is this person going to be healthy for me? Okay. Are they going to increase freedom in my life or not? So that's the first part. Now, the second part of this when you begin to dig deeper, when I speak to couples or when I speak to singles in the context of relationships, kind of like what's going wrong? The dating marketplace, as far as I can tell, is bad. As it stands, about half of marriages are failing. There's all kinds of reasons. But in my mind, I feel like there's a core reason, which sounds simple, but it's so, so deep. And it's this. I'm of the view that a lot of people in relationships don't actually know why they're in a relationship. They know that they want to be in the relationship, and that matters. They know that they feel like being in that relationship, and that also matters. But that's not a reason. They don't know why they're in a relationship. And that creates a problem. What's happened is that people are using what they want and what they feel as what they believe is the reason to be in a relationship, when what you want and what you feel is not reliable. I like to say what it is that you want and what you feel is like the weather, because it changes so frequently. What it is that you need is something deeper and something more stable. Let me use an example. For any given institution, be it a company, public or private, or a church or university, institutions have a vision statement. They have a vision statement, which is a way of saying, this is what this organization is here to do. This is the purpose of this organization. And that vision statement is important because it informs all the efforts that that organization is going to make in order to realize its purpose. And it isn't just about doing the things that are fun or that are enjoyable. So let's say making profit or growing your company or whatever. But it also has to do with the reasons why you're going to do the difficult things, to suffer the hard times. When you understand the vision statement of an organization, especially, let's say, as an entrepreneur, the kind of work that is required, the capital, the hours, all those difficult things, having a coherent vision statement, a reason for why this organization exists, is very important. And it's something which is going to stabilize your efforts. What I'm saying is a lot of couples, a lot of relationships don't have a vision statement. And so what would that be? I like to describe this as a mechanism of action. It's a way of knowing. It's a way of knowing if our relationship is still healthy. So many people wind up making a mistake that the extent to which their relationship feels good, the extent to which they want to still be in the relationship, those experiences, those chemistry, if that's all they have as far as what this relationship is about, what they end up working to do all the time is to chase the feeling of wanting to be in the relationship. So the focus of their efforts, their day-to-day tasks, the things that they are looking out for in the relationship, it's about, as long as it feels good, then we should be together, which creates a problem because in the course of a relationship, just because you want to be in the relationship, you're not always going to want to be in the relationship, and the relationship is not always going to feel good. But that may not necessarily mean that the relationship should end. And part of what's happening now is that people find themselves running up against situations or seasons, times in a relationship when they don't feel like it. Maybe things have gone wrong. Maybe they've drifted apart. Maybe things have gone catastrophically wrong. Trust has been broken. Whatever it is, when you reach a season or circumstance in your relationship when you don't want to and you don't feel like it creates a problem, because if that's the only way you know to tell if your relationship is healthy and you don't have that, you run the risk of making decisions to either continue that relationship or to end that relationship that maybe you shouldn't have made, you know. And so the thing that I like to propose to couples as a different way of looking at it, as a different way of being able to ask yourself, what is this relationship about? And what drives the relationship? What are we doing on a day-to-day basis? Is based on things that I believe are common in the healthiest, longest lasting relationships. I believe that in those relationships that last the longest time, so we're talking about people in long-term partnerships, people who are married and are successfully so, the relationship is healthy more often than not. What these people are doing on a day-to-day basis is they're not chasing the feeling of being in love with one another. They welcome the feeling and they enjoy those experiences. But in terms of what they are doing on a day-to-day basis, they understand that that's not what their relationship is only about. What they are doing is that they are building their relationship on a set of common values, a common way of understanding the world, a common way of understanding themselves and each other, and that their relationship is built for the purpose, basically, of helping each other realize those values, to live out those values. That's what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. That's what the relationship is about. And that helps because it creates a reference point around which that relationship can evolve. It creates a foundation upon which that relationship can be built. Those values are what the relationship is about. Okay. And so that's a very helpful thing once a couple has it. So think about these values. The way I like to describe them, think about these values as a way of saying, this is who I am. I believe this way of being a human being is a way of being a human that is so valuable that I am willing to take on the benefits of it. But at the same time, I'm willing to pay the price that is required at the same time because I believe that it's worth it. Because in order to be a certain type of human being, there's some things that you have to allow yourself to do, and there's some things that you have to deny yourself of doing. When you have what I like to call a relationship foundation, you have a way of being able to say, this is who we are in this relationship. This is how we do things. And this is why we do things that way. And it gives us a lot of benefits as a couple. But this also means that there's certain ways of thinking, of behaving, of being in this world that we're going to deny ourselves, right? And we are saying, we don't behave in that way because this is who we are. Some things that, for example, people take for granted. Monogamy. It's a way of being in a relationship that most people want, but without necessarily grasping the fact that it's not as easy as it looks. Because if it was, people wouldn't be cheating in the numbers that they do, right? And people wonder why. A lot of the time it's because when people find themselves in that situation, they don't have a way of weighing up, is this who I am? All they have is, this is what I want and this is what I feel. And when you're in that moment, that's not enough. You need something more. Any number of the kinds of crises that can come into a relationship. When a relationship starts getting a bit stale, chemistry fades, you could leave because you don't want to, you don't feel like it. But when people have these sets of values, they have something that forces them to ask, but wait, what is this relationship about? And that reason matters to me. I'm going to invest more. I'm going to try harder because I have a reason to be with this person. And it's not just about the fact that I want to. There's a purpose behind it. What does that look like? What are those values? I like to break them down into three parts. Okay, so these are three ways that I believe couples need to be compatible. You need to meet each other. You have to be balanced with each other in three different ways. So, in my context as a psychologist, this would encompass people who have all kinds of beliefs. I'm speaking in a church context, but please understand I'm speaking as a psychologist. So, I'm speaking to multiple kinds of people. It's quite broad as well. But the first one is existential. Like, how do we answer the biggest, hardest, most mind-bending questions of life? This matters. Like, do you have a position on this issue? What is ultimate truth? What is moral? What is not? What's important in life compared to what is not? What's your position on this? As a couple, it's very important to know that, right? Because it's going to influence your behavior in multiple areas of life. Now, again, in my context as a psychologist, what I would say is it's important for you to have a position, to understand your position as well as you can, to be able to discuss it, describe it, and then you have to have a track record of actually living it. Saying it is enough. Okay, people need to be able to say about you that you have a reputation for living that way. Perfection is off the table, well, that's fine, but there's a consistency about it. So that's the first thing, that a couple needs to be compatible. As Christ followers, is that compatibility. But different people believe different things. Whatever it is, whether it's a person from a different religion or different culture, some people are traditional African, whatever it is, in my context as a psychologist, these are the people that I'm seeing. But the point is, do you have something common that's binding you? The second way of being compatible is personality compatibility. And this is very important. This is the chemistry, right? This is the I want and I feel. Am I attracted to you? Do we hang out very well? Are you my friend? Are you my best friend? But most importantly, are you my life partner? Are you a person that I'm going to build a life with? I like to say, am I going to invest into you, my one non-renewable resource, which is my time, to help you become the best version of a human being that you can? And then the last one is intellectual compatibility. Basically, do I find you interesting as a person? This matters because over the course of a lifetime, we're going to get to know each other so well that I'm going to be able to finish sentences at some point. But am I looking forward to the mind you're going to have later on in age? Taken together, what a healthy couple is doing over the long run is that they're using these ideas to inform the way that they treat one another. So when they ask themselves, how do I speak to this person? They have that reference point. How do I listen to this person? They have that reference point. How do I treat them? What does it mean to be a man, a woman, a husband, a wife, a father, a mother? They have that as the reference point because that's who they are. When taken together, what it is this gives you, I like to call it a mechanism of action. It's a way of saying how something works. When you take a headache tablet, it works. It's not magic. It has to do with brain receptors and pain blockers and stuff like that. This is a mechanism of action. It's a way of saying how something works. When you look at a couple that's healthy, asking yourself, what's happening with those people? What I'm suggesting, it's something like this. This is what's happening. This is what they're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
The healthiest couples. And it's very important for when things go well, but it's even more important for when things go wrong. Because when things go wrong, you have to be able to ask yourself, but what happened? What happened? The events might be clear. There might be all kinds of things that happened. Lying, cheating, infidelity, wasted money. Yes, but what was behind that? If a couple has this as a reference point, when they understand themselves, and they're able to say, this is who I am as a person, existentially, personality, intellectually. This is who I am. This is who you are. And the way we are aligned. This is the idea of a human being that we hold ourselves accountable to. Then when answering the question of what happened, it forces you to ask 3 questions, really. Because that person might have made a mistake. And if they made a mistake, what you should be seeing is a person who's taking accountability for it. When I describe whatever it is that happens as a mistake, I like to say, if I am intellectually and morally honest with myself, I am capable, like anyone else, of making all kinds of things, or of making all kinds of mistakes. And so if it was a mistake, I should be a person who's returning back to their values, who's coming back to themselves and saying, I'm taking accountability. I made this mistake. I'm going to earn trust like this. Whatever it is that I need to do, to go to therapy for this or couples counseling for that. But if it is a genuine mistake, that person, the way I like to describe it is that person unknew themselves. They unknew themselves, like they walked away from themselves. And now they recognize that and they're coming back to themselves. If it's a mistake, that's what you should be seeing. You know, it doesn't make it easy to repair the relationship, but that's what you should be seeing. So that if you're going to decide whether you're going to take the person back, you're not making that decision purely on the basis of the fact that you want to or you feel like it. You're making it on the basis of reasons. You're saying to yourself, if this person is returning back to the person it's supposed to be, what responsibility do I have to that if it's genuine? And that's a hard question to answer. But the next 2 options are very difficult as well, because sometimes people change. Sometimes when you see something that's gone wrong in a relationship, it's because the person who did it, or both of you who did it, you changed. You used to be a particular kind of person, and now you're not. And in that case, if you're making a decision based on what's going to be healthy for you, and if the person that you're dealing with is not what they used to be, what good reason do you have to put yourself at risk of being hurt when you're dealing with a person who doesn't share your values? That's also a difficult question to answer. And the third one is the most difficult, which is the person could have lied. The person could have been pretending to be a certain kind of person the whole time. And if that is the case, what does making a healthy decision look like? If I now understand that this person was pretending to have these values, was pretending to have these ethics, but they actually never had them the whole time. A person, let's say, as a Christian, the question that when I found myself in situations where things might be difficult in a relationship, I can validate the things that I I might be dissatisfied with in my partner. And that's important, and that needs addressing. But my primary place of attention is being able to ask myself, to question, to have a conversation with my deep faith and my beliefs, and to ask of them how I should respond to the situation. So for me, for example, if a person has hope in Christ, what it is that I've always said is, how can you help me to see them the way that God sees them, to listen to them the way that God listens to them, to speak to them the way that God speaks to them, to feel for them the way that God feels for them, to treat them the way that God treats them. And that's the power of having a deep value, because in that moment, I may not feel like it. And in fact, it takes time to develop those abilities. And so I have to hold that space. I have to be able to stay in that a place of discomfort instead of running with what I want, running with what I feel at that moment. And that's the power of having this thing, this fixed point in identity. in the course of a relationship because you have something to run back to. I like to describe it as a rallying when you do fire drills in any building, you have these rallying points, you know, or let's say people are at the mall and it's busy and it's December. Before everyone goes in case signal is lost, we don't know who it is, we have a rallying point. Like if you're not sure, just go back to the car, right? That's the rallying point. And then we'll meet you there if we lose you, right? And if we don't meet you there, we're going to start getting worried. That's the point of a rallying point. The relationship has a rallying point. Like if I'm stuck in my feelings, if I'm stuck in my anger or in my resentment or whatever, I validate all of that. We need to talk about that. But in terms of my disposition towards you, the reason why I need to treat you in a particular kind of way is these values. So I'm going to show up like that. I'm going to show up like this because we believe that. That's our rallying point. And that's a very good question because it's a question of, first of all, authenticity, right? The way, when I speak about this with couples, when I tell them, like, before you ideally you meet a person, you should have come ideally to a position about your existential self, your personality self, and your intellectual self. You should be able to know yourself well enough in terms of what my deepest beliefs are. And the only way that you can do that is to actually lean into learning about them and actually exploring them. So if you're going to call yourself a Christian or whatever other else, whatever it is that you're going to say you believe, then how much are you able to describe the ways in which it informs how you make decisions in your life? Because many people would say they believe something, but when it comes to actually applying it, they wouldn't necessarily understand what that looks like. And again, it's not asking a person to be perfect, but if it's legitimate and if it's authentic, then it should be informing how you live your life, right? And then if that is the case, then you should be able to get to a place where when you're meeting someone, and this is the problem, the chemistry usually leads first because you're attracted, and that's beautiful. But the assumption that people make is that just because I'm attracted to you and the chemistry is awesome, they often make the mistake of assuming, therefore, we should be together. But they don't stop, double up, and asking themselves the question, but who are you? Who are you, though? What do you believe? What guides your life? What standards do you hold yourself to? And that's where this part of an ideal courting or meeting process would happen, where you actually get to know the person, right? What they deeply believe, what track record they have of maintaining that character, the reputation that they have within their community. All of those kinds of things, you really are finding out, you're vetting a person. Then you can begin to find out what's legitimate and what's not. At least it improves the odds that you're going to be able to find out what's legitimate and what's not, right? But most people don't do this. I mean, things are so bad that people find themselves 3 months into something and they'll look at each other and they'll say, are we dating? Like this conversation doesn't happen. And so that's the challenge, to actually be able to pause as early as possible in the beginning to ask myself, first of all, ideally, where do I stand about this? And then I need to be able to explain this to someone when they're getting to know me, so that as we're talking and as we're interacting, we're comparing notes. I am this sort of person. You are this sort of person. Are we actually aligned? Are we being the same image of a human being? As a man and as a woman, but the same thing. So that when we build a life together, we're building towards the same direction. These conversations don't happen. And so people get involved and they might date. They might even get married, have kids, be together for decades. Only later on they begin to realize, I don't know why I'm doing this, actually. whoever's watching this, wherever you are, you would have accessed this video from Destiny Church, and you'll be coming at it from a place where it's a church environment. Now, I don't know whether or not you believe in Jesus or you don't, but here are some things as a person who believes in Jesus can say to you with absolute confidence. Regardless of what difficulty that you are going through, and regardless of the journey that you are on at this point in your relationship with Jesus, you need to understand that Jesus is pro-relationships. He is pro-marriage. That marriage is at the center, is the centerpiece for God's plan for how it is that this world is supposed to function. God, if you bring Jesus into your marriage, into your relationship, if you use him as a reference point of searching yourself regarding how I may respond to this situation, understand this. You are not running against the grain. You are running with the wind at your back because God wants you to succeed. And he wants you to give you a way of understanding what the purpose of your relationship is about, what it means for you to be a human, what it means for you to be a man, what it means for you to be a woman, how to raise your kids, how to prioritize your finances, literally everything. He can help you to understand that, right? But the best way to understand that is to understand him. And so if you're willing to go there with yourself, trust me, you're on winning ground. Families are the constituent units of our entire society. God wants families. That's what I would say.